Okay, so hopefully at this point the juices are flowing, people are interacting. As a facilitator, you're starting to capture answers and kind of moving through just guiding the conversation through the day. How much of this do you have planned out and kind of, perfectly oriented around the agenda? Or is it just kind of like you're just off to the races and whatever happens, you're just running with it?
A lot of times as a facilitator, we can often feel like we've got to have every minute of an 8-hour day planned. And it needs to go exactly to plan for this thing to work right. It really doesn't work that way. If you've got a loose agenda of 3 topics like we talked about, then you really only need to plan about 30 minutes of that 8-hour day. You've got to get your opener right like we talked about. When you kick off an exercise, what are you going to teach on and what story are you going to tell? You got to get your anchoring questions right. And really from there, you just got to leave a lot of room for discussion. And that discussion is just flow. Right? You cannot, no matter what you do, architect a discussion like that. You've got to leave room for it to be a little bit messy. You've got to leave room for, I'm gonna let this conversation go a little bit, and then I'll bring it back on track. I mean, I've never seen a day go exactly like I thought it would, and I've stopped trying to make that happen. But as the discussion progresses, as we form our desired future, or as we form our objectives, you start checking off those boxes, right? You start landing stuff, and you start making progress. As each exercise comes to a close, we really just land on: is this our desired future? Yes. Okay, great. Let's move on. Next exercise, open it with a quick teaching and a story, just like we did on the first one, and you just keep going, right? So in terms of actually like making it through the day, that's given me a lot of relief. I don't need to have 8 hours of stuff planned.
Yeah.
I just need to have my openers and my closes planned and leave room for discussion.
Let's talk about the closes, because you've got 30 minutes of getting everything going and set up the right way, 6 hours of flow that you're still facilitating, but you're really wanting to make all that 6 hours of flow and conversation move towards a landing zone. And that landing zone is, you ask the question, what outcomes do I want from the day? So how do we make sure we kind of get into that landing zone, and then from there, move those discussions into the utility of driving our business forward? And this doesn't become one of those days we talked about earlier where we go, well, that was a waste of time, or it all just went on the shelf and we went back to work and didn't do anything with it.
I try to leave 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour at the end of the day, depending on how much we've covered, for action items, next steps, owners, due dates, right? Like I want at the end of that day to button up that discussion and have that team be ready and committed to put it into practice. So when we land our desired future, or when we land our objectives, or when we land our quarterly priorities, I don't necessarily in the moment land all the owners and all the time frames and all the next steps in the moment. I usually kind of wait to the end, and then really as a group button all of that stuff up together. And that has been it's simple. This is easy stuff. But that simple thing has made it so easy to actually put it into practice walking out of that session. Because most of the next steps are probably a week, maybe 2 out in terms of timeline, short-term stuff. Okay, so we're going to take this objective and we're going to communicate it to the team. Or we're going to take this objective and wordsmith it some, and I want you to bring it back and give us an update. Those kind of things are 1 or 2 weeks out. But if everybody walks out of there with crystal clear next steps based on the things that we've landed, then we can actually put this stuff into practice. And from there, it's just about making sure it gets done.
I agree it's simple, but I want to talk about the significance of that last stage of making sure that every objective has an owner. And we like to phrase it in the language of who's going to do what by when. And these objectives are big. And, they're important things that are typically above and beyond somebody's day job. I like to think of them as bowling balls. And if you have 7 objectives, each person should walk out with a bowling ball, not 7 bowling balls for one person. And if you as the facilitator, the leader, don't assign actions and owners in the conversation, you become the de facto babysitter of these 7 bowling balls. Because I've done that. I've walked out and I'm like, wait, I thought everybody was just going to go do this stuff. And I didn't get to clarity. They went back to their jobs. 3 weeks goes by, nothing's happened. I assumed they just were going to pick up these naturally based on their areas of responsibility. It's really good to get that clarity written down and make sure everybody's kind of committed to, oh, yes, my name's on that. I'll make sure in 2 weeks we're going to check in and I'll have an update.
That's right. It's deceptive because we are the group that's going to get this done.
Right.
But we as a group do not get it all done together as one group activity. And there's a way, I've seen it happen time and time again, to have owners of individual objectives that are part of your desired future, where we are still working together as a group to get it done, but we have a clear champion of each one to make sure it gets done the right way, like we committed to it. And when you get that in place, stuff moves.
This is really good. That's how you do an offsite. But again, the magic is the results that it creates for your business as you go forward. So as we wrap up, many business owners, they have weekly meetings with their direct reports. They're used to checking in. Oftentimes, though, they're just talking about the work of that week. How do we get these big objectives integrated into our weekly rhythm and get that traction and accountability to make sure we're marching towards, if we're not going to have another offsite until a quarter from now, we want to make sure we're getting kind of systematic or incremental rather progress on those objectives. What does that look like? How do we make time for that when we're running everything else in the day-to-day?
I love it. It's a great question. I think about it like you have a countdown timer that has started walking out of that session, that when it gets to 0, that session is pretty well forgotten. There is precious time. I like to communicate to the team as soon as I can after that session, while it's fresh, while it's front of mind, because every day that goes by, every week that goes by, it just gets a little bit colder. But if you can actually communicate it to the team, if you can actually get them to see, hey, this is where we want to go this year, this is what we think we need to do to pull that off, then the team can rally around it. They can ask good questions. They can say, what's my part? You can actually, with the owners, say, okay, and you're going to see this owner follow up with you on this objective, right? You're preparing the team. It's not just like, why is all this new conversation happening? Where's all this coming from? It's really preparing the team for, we've gotten clarity like we've never had before. Now we can walk it out together. Here's where we're going. Here's why we're going there. Here's your part in it. Now let's go.